Welcome to News West 9's West Texas View with Johnny Lou Avery.
Welcome to the West Texas View. I'm Johnny Lou Avery, and last week you met Dr. Bobby Jane and Dr. Stephanie Caples, who were here from the Texas Tech University Health Science Center, and their specialties are psychiatry and psychology. And we were talking about all of the different ways that psychiatry and psychology mesh together, but also their standalone disciplines too. But today, I want us to start out talking about the differences between the cultures and the genders in psychiatry and psychology and the treatment of different prevalent problems that we have. And so, Stephanie, I understand that you have a specialty in minorities and women.
I do. I'd like to refer to it as a special interest in minorities and women in psychology and psychiatry, particularly the minority, the racial and ethnic minority is where one of my interests lie, because mental health is seen very differently, I feel, and you can add on to this, between different cultures. The African American culture, the Hispanic culture may have a different understanding of depression or bipolar disorder than maybe the mainstream Caucasian culture. And so the way that it's approached in a behavioral health aspect can be a little different. It has to be culture-based. I have to be able to identify what that person believes based on their culture and their belief system, and change my therapy according to what they believe in.
So does that mean that normally minorities fear, or are they think there's a stigma attached to it? Or
I think so. I think that's exactly what it means. I think particularly my studies have been in the African American and the Hispanic culture, and there is still a taboo with going to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and that is one of the reasons that I decided to go into this field, is to change that taboo. I've heard a lot of my family members and colleagues say, I'm not going to go to tell someone to tell me they're crazy, when it's really not that at all.
And we've said over and over that everything is pointing to the mind and the mental and the physical cannot be separated. That's right. But that word just hadn't filtered down to everybody yet.
Well, yeah, it hasn't been believed.
Well,
I don't think.
Do you find that with women also, in general, not just minorities, but women in general?
With women, I think it depends on maybe the culture that the woman comes from. Definitely, I think, just based on society, women have maybe more of a tendency to be believed to share their emotions, but that does not always happen. Some women don't want to cry because they believe crying is a sign of weakness, because it has been passed down from generations that you don't cry. So with women, I have a particular interest in helping them understand who they are as a woman, how to adapt to different situations based on being a woman, because we have different challenges from men. And so I think that's important based on your racial ethnic culture, but then also in our society. How do you adapt to that? Some women may not feel comfortable identifying angry feelings and accepting angry feelings, because as women, maybe we shouldn't. Maybe it's not always accepted. So with the women, it's slightly different. It's helping them understand their emotions, what we call maybe the negative emotions, which would be the anger, the frustration, some of the fear. Understanding that, identifying that, and then responding to it in an effective way.
And so if you have a patient, a minority patient, that you've been working with, and you think you finally got them to the point where they don't have these negative feelings or these fear of going to a psychologist, and then you bring in Dr. Jane, and does he have to start all over from the standpoint of a psychiatrist? Are you working in saying all mental health?
I'm saying all mental health. Hopefully, it's one of my goals that by the time they've come to see me for the second or third time, that they realize kind of what it is. I do a lot of education about therapy and the therapeutic process and psychiatry. So if I need to bring in Dr. Jane, by the time I've referred them, I've explained to them what's going to happen when they go see him. So I say, he's a great little man who'll make you laugh and everything will be great. And so I try to erase the stigma and the anxiety. I think no matter what culture or what gender that you have, when they come to see us, there's already a certain amount of anxiety associated with it. So I think Dr. Jane and I both work to alleviate a lot of that anxiety, help them calm down, help them relax. And Dr. Jane was mentioning earlier, when they come to us, they say, oh, this is nothing like what I thought it would be. Right. Yeah. So after they start to see us, then I think some of that taboo or the belief that it's, you know, psychiatry is only for crazy people starts to erase. But then what you'll find is they may not want family members to know that they're coming. So then you have to continue the work until they're comfortable with it. But to answer your question directly, by the time I send someone to him, or even if it's initially, I really work very hard to explain to them what it's going to be like when they go and see Dr. Jane, and I think he does a phenomenal job.
And why we need to cooperate.
And why. and why. And I explain to them that I don't do medications. Part of my job, I have to know a bit about the medications just so I can monitor the symptoms, because I do see them more frequently, a lot more, many more times than Dr. Jane. But when they go to him, I've explained to them what's going to happen and the things that he may discuss with them, may or may not. And then when they get to him, I think just his natural presence is just enough to help them calm down.
But then you do not, you always know what kind of medication he has prescribed for them.
Well, after they have gone to them, I either get their file or they'll come in and tell me the medication. That way, the symptoms, because like we said last week, the symptoms may be different for everybody. You know, depression is a cluster of symptoms, so they may have symptoms that are more prominent, like sleeping too much or not eating. Those are the symptoms that I will watch on a weekly basis to see if there's any improvement from the medication that he has given to them. If after a certain amount of time they're not really reporting a lot of improvement in those symptoms, they're not sleeping better, they're not eating any more than they were, then I might say, hey, Dr. Jane, they're still, saying the symptoms are still there. And then it's up to him to decide.
That usually helps. I mean, working together, that's the major benefit you have. And you also see many psychiatrists' office, you have a psychologist working in the same office.
Right.
And that's the major advantage you have, that you can go next door, or just pick up the phone call and say, look, I have this patient there, you saw him 2 weeks ago, and he's not doing very well. Can you suggest anything, or can you help out before you get to see you next time? But I do want to bring up the very important aspect that you both pick it up about gender and racial differences in psychiatry. I don't think any other field of medicine is as much affected as psychiatry gets affected because of the culture, the gender, and the racial origin. From the point of view, because depression manifests very differently, particularly depression manifests differently in different cultures and also in different genders. For example, manifestation of depression in some cultures is very different. In cultures like mine, South Asian cultures and some Hispanic cultures, depression is probably more towards having somatic symptoms, as you call it. Maybe aches and pains. They present more commonly. I'm not saying it's always there, but more commonly with aches and pains. And in response to medication also, it's very different.
So all of that is almost like a jigsaw puzzle that you're putting together. We're going to have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're going to talk more about this gender and race thing. This is very interesting. See you in just a minute.